Okay. Let me start. Hi, I'm Andrea Bogart, manager of Lawrence Technological University's Detroit Center for Design and Technology and founder of Embrace Creatives. I'm thrilled you can attend our first live stream event for Yeah, What Lester Said, an exhibit and panel on sustainability and design. Lester Brown has been called one of the great pioneer environmentalists and one of Marquis' Who's Who 50 Great Americans. Earning his master's degree in architectural economics from the University of Maryland in 1959, he went on to pioneer the concept of sustainable development. Climate change is no longer an abstract idea that might happen sometime in the future. It's upon us now, and its effects can be felt via enormous storms, serious drought, and massive flooding here in the Midwest. By 2100, rising oceans are estimated to force as many as 2 billion residents of coastal areas worldwide to migrate toward higher ground, and agriculture yields in huge swaths of the Midwest will decline by 50% or more if we don't cut emissions. Collaborating with American Institute of Architects, Michigan, 2030 District Detroit, who are here with today, Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids, activists, artists, green infrastructure experts, and architects, LTU's Detroit Center for Design and Technology and their curatorial partner, Embrace Creatives, are bringing this absolutely necessary conversation to the forefront before it's too late. The DCDT has put together 2.5 months of programming, along with an art exhibit, which is currently live on our website, detroit.design/Lester. I've added the link into the Facebook comment section, so you can go ahead and click. So please visit our page to sign up for all of the events that interest you, and go ahead and enter the art gallery and view the architecture board exhibit. Everything is free and open to the public. Today's important program introduces you to 3 2030 districts here in the state of Michigan: Detroit, Ann Arbor, and Grand Rapids. These districts of the national organization are working hard to establish a network of healthy, high-performance building districts and cities. During their presentations today, they will cover topics like indoor air quality, embodied carbon, and what COVID-19 teaches us about pollution and carbon emissions. During this program, we will be offering information and resources that go along with the presentations, so watch the comment section in each of the areas that you're participating with, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Please type your questions into the comments below the live stream that you're watching. The speakers will see them, and then at the end, they are going to answer you. Hopefully they'll get to all of you. If your questions are not answered, you can go ahead and reach out to them directly. You'll be receiving their contact information at the end. If you have a specific question, please indicate whether it's Detroit, Ann Arbor, or Grand Rapids. Otherwise, everyone or whoever will answer. So it's time to begin, and I'd like to introduce you to the speakers. Connie Lily is the executive director for the Detroit 2030 district. She was an integral part in bringing a district to Detroit. Connie has been working in the built environment for over 25 years. The last 15 years, she has focused on energy efficiency and high performance buildings. Connie was the 2019 recipient of the AIA Detroit Honorary Affiliate for her work in the built environment in Detroit. This award is given to non-architects who made a significant contribution. Connie is a lead AP and holds an MBA in strategic management with a focus on corporate sustainability. Our next speaker is Sherry Holman. Sherry is the executive director of the USGBC of West Michigan, director of the Grand Rapids 2030 district, and creator of the Michigan Battle of the Buildings, Biggest Loser styled energy competition. Sherry is an effective business and community leader with a passion to transform our built environment by breaking down systemic barriers and prioritizing environmental justice and positive human health outcomes. Her focus areas include energy and water conservation, indoor environmental quality, advancement of clean renewable energy, and smart mobility solutions that result in the advancement of equitable social and economic opportunities. Our final speaker is Jan Culbertson. Jan received her Master's of Architectural degree from the University of Michigan and has been practicing architecture for nearly 40 years. As a senior principal at AC3 Collaborative Architecture, she is focused on sustainability not only in her practice, but facilitated architecture and 2030 continuing education sessions for architects in Southeastern Michigan, and continues to promote education and advocacy for carbon neutral future. Growing up in Ann Arbor, Jan continues to work and serve in the town that she loves. Jan is Leadership Council Chair for the Ann Arbor 2030 District, a member of the Ann Arbor Public Schools Sustainability Advisory Committee, and the Ann Arbor Zero Technical Advisory Committee. I'm going to turn the event over now to our speakers, and I'm going to see you all at the conclusion. Remember to ask your questions in the comments section, and the speakers will get to them when they can. All right, ladies, have fun.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks for inviting us. We're excited to be here today and talk about how we are fighting climate change with 2030 districts here in Michigan. So I will share my screen and get our presentation up here. All right, hopefully you're all seeing that. So the 2030 districts here in Michigan, as Andrea so kindly pointed out, are in Grand Rapids. They're in Ann Arbor, and we are in Detroit. We are the only state in the network of districts who actually has 3 districts in our state. So go Michigan. I represent Grand Rapids, and you'll be hearing from Connie and Jan here shortly. And I wanted to say too, as I was listening to Andrea talk about climate change, I just wanted to put a little positivity into that and just point out that as humans, we have tackled lots of big, hairy problems, and we can tackle this one too. So I have a lot of confidence and excitement towards our work. And I know that in the end, we will be successful because failure is not an option. So we do represent a network that spans across the country and in Canada. There are 22 established districts as of right now, and they represent 503 million square feet across North America and Canada. And just in our district, and I'll let Connie and Jan talk about how many square feet are in their district, but we have about 14.5 million here in Grand Rapids. As a network, we get together once a year in person. Unfortunately, this year we'll be doing that virtually, as many of you are also living alongside of us in the new virtual life. So next year we'll be in Detroit. That's where we were supposed to be this year meeting. So it's really great to get the districts together and talk about what's going on in all of our districts. So those 503 million square feet represent 1,400 buildings, more than 465 property managers, 285 professional stakeholders, and more than 210 community stakeholders. We are all working towards the same goal, and that is to reduce 50% of energy from existing buildings. I'm sorry, not energy, carbon, and to start new construction carbon neutral by 2030. So we do that through the reduction in transportation, investing renewable energy and investing in energy efficiency, and water consumption. There's a lot of energy that is consumed when moving water. So let me talk about that a minute, because I think that this can be a confusing part of where we're trying to get to. So our baseline is built on 2003 CBEX. CBEX stands for Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey. And so basically think of it as an average building. So if your building was a C, then you would have a certain amount of energy that you use based on that building type to keep your building functioning. And that median number is what we use as a baseline. Our baseline goes back to 2003 because that's when we named the baseline and put our goals adjusted to that baseline. So what we're trying to do as a group is reduce 50% from existing buildings from that baseline. So hopefully that makes sense. We have a lot of people that say, well, I can never reduce 50% more than I'm doing right now, or I've done a lot of great things already, and so I can't reduce 50% from where I'm at now. So if you've done great things in the last few years, you're already on your way there, because that baseline never changes. And it isn't based on your individual building. It's based on your building type. Okay, so some of you may have already met the goals. Some of you may be surpassing them, and some of you may be not quite there yet. So it's the group together that we're trying to get over this finish line. I wanted to point out too that emissions aren't just from the operations of buildings, although that is a huge part of it. And the reason that the 2030 districts are focused on building and transportation is because they are the largest part of carbon, the largest emitter of carbon in our built environment. So if you look at this graph, you can see that building operations, transportation, and manufacturing are a huge part of emissions. But one other thing that we don't often consider is the actual construction of the buildings. I know Jan's going to address this later, so I'm not going to dive very deep into that, but I wanted to point out that building a building also comes with its cost of carbon, right? So think about your roofing material and your, I got my slides out of order here. So anyway, your roofing material, your concrete, those processes are carbon intensive just to create. And then there's a carbon intensity factor to getting it to your site as well. So being mindful when we construct a building is very important. So I'm sorry that I might be just a little out of order on my slides, but this should have come before that conversation where I wanted to point out what a 2030 district is. So we're led by our owners and our managers, but we are a partnership of everyone it takes to get there. So that includes our community stakeholders, who are other organizations that have the same types of mission or values that we have as a 2030 district. So they're partners as well. And then there's professional stakeholders who are normally the service providers that can help the property owners and managers reduce carbon, reduce energy, etc. So those three are our types. Our community stakeholders and our owners join our districts for free. There's no cost. And there is an annual membership fee for our professional stakeholders. Every district is different in what that costs for their district, but it's around $300 to $500 a year for most of our districts. So this is my second slide to that conversation. And again, I just wanted to show, like, when you're just looking at a building, the amount of carbon that contributes to just the construction of that building. So it's important that we're thinking about that. So why buildings, right? So by 2060, the world is projected to add 2.5 trillion square feet or an area that is equal to the entire global building stock. This is equivalent to adding an entire New York City to the planet every 34 days. So we are a country on the move. So just looking at our carbon emissions, we can see this is 2018. And I think that with the coronavirus, we're going to see some progress here in our country, probably all countries, from the reduction in manufacturing that we had for several months. But unfortunately, I think that we will go back to our old ways. So we can't get complacent that we've done well over the last 3 months. We need to keep that kind of good work going. And so you can see that our developing country, India, is one of our largest emissions generator. USA still going up. China globally, as of 2018, we were still going up 2%. But we do see Europe making some great strides. So this was printed or sourced on 11/9 of 19. So we'll see what that looks like next year. I wanted to talk for a minute too about the carbon bank, because that's something that a lot of people are talking about these days, and not everyone understands it. So in order for us to stay within the Paris Climate Agreement and to our 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius per year, we only have so much carbon that we can emit into the atmosphere before it's too late. And there's no going back. We've gone too far. And historically, we have believed that to be the year of 2040, or I'm sorry, 2050. But Architecture 2030 now is saying it's going to be more like 2040. And so it's become even more important that we're paying attention to emissions, lowering our emissions, because we don't have a lot of time left before we really need to be generating zero carbon into our atmosphere. So this is just a little graph, kind of helps understand, what's in our bank, that 340 gigatons, and what we need to be doing over the next 20 years to get where we need to be so we can put a stop to global warming. So our buildings, again, bouncing back to buildings, and I'm so sorry that somehow my slides got out of order, but I wanted to point out here, because traditionally we are a nation that likes to build low cost. Maybe you've heard the term bid spec, right? So what we see here, though, is that the lion's share of our cost to a building is actually in our operational costs. And so when we do these low-cost constructions without prioritizing high-efficient equipment, we're actually raising our operational costs. And that, if we were to pay more attention to the design and the construction and implementing high efficiency and good building practices, we can see those operational costs drop. I wanted to point out too that I've given you this slide, but there are varying reports across the country on construction and what portion it is of the overall life cycle analysis of a building. And those are estimated anywhere between 5 and 25%. So I've shown a slide that's 20, kind of on the high side, just to give you an idea. So what are we doing in Grand Rapids? The Grand Rapids 2030 district is partnered with our city, and the program that we are focused on is called the Zero Cities Project. It is 11 cities working together. I'm going to go back, sorry, because I wasn't sure what slide I had next. 11 cities working together across the country. Our goal is to develop policies and programs to get our entire building stock to zero carbon. From this process, over the last 2 years, we have learned our baseline. We've learned who our highest users are. We've learned where our most potential is. And I'll show you a couple of those slides. So one of the things that we've learned in Grand Rapids is that we have a lot of single family homes. Every city is different, but ours is about half and half when it comes to gross floor area. We have significantly more single family homes, but they account for a little less than half of our overall building square footage. That has helped us understand too, that if you look at this chart, most of our buildings are 0 to 20,000 square feet. I would guess that this probably isn't true in Detroit. Maybe more true in Ann Arbor, I don't know, but this is what we know about Grand Rapids. So going through this process, this is Zero Cities process, has really helped us identify where to focus our time and what our baselines look like and where we need to focus our work. I should also mention that while the 2030 districts are focused on commercial buildings, our Zero Cities project is focused on all buildings, residential and commercial. From the city's perspective, we want to get all buildings to that zero carbon point. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us. So how do we play? One of the ways that we've been successful already, and I certainly hope this is okay with Lawrence Tech, that I'm showing you a picture here of cannabis. But right away, we realized that growing cannabis was going to use 4 times as much energy as our traditional large energy users in our city, like manufacturing and hospitals. These were traditionally our largest energy users. Cannabis is going to use 4 times as much energy. So while we wanted to invite them into our city, we didn't want them to blow our goals out of the water. So one of our first wins has been that we were able to get some environmental regulations into our licensing for our cannabis industry. What do those look like? Well, we're going to require them to join the 2030 district. We're requiring them to benchmark. We're requiring them to do energy audits. We have some lighting requirements. So, it's kind of twofold. First of all, we want them to use less energy. Second of all, we want to invite the industry in, but we want to invite them in a way that ensures that they're a business that's going to make it past that 5-year mark. We don't want people coming in, doing business for a year, and then leaving us with these crummy buildings. So we know that Grand Rapids emits 1.5 million metric tons of carbon per year. That is just from our commercial side. That's from our energy, water, and transportation. When we add in our residential side, it's 2.2 million metric tons of CO2 per year. So again, this has helped us understand where we are, where we need to go. So what are we doing? One of the things that we've been doing is called the Grand Rapids Zero Net Carbon Series. And so these are lunch and learns that we've been doing locally, helping owners find incentives. We talk about financing opportunities. We talk about building audits. We do transportation events. So lots of events to help people understand what they can do to reduce carbon in their buildings. Most recently, we've been doing a lot around COVID. Unfortunately, this came along, kind of surprised us all. And so we've had to suggest some things that we're not that comfortable with, like, hey, turn off that demand control ventilation for a while. Think about opening your doors and windows, right? So a lot of things that traditionally best practice items we've kind of had to back away from, at least for the interim. So we've started a webinar series over the past 8 weeks where we're talking about technologies that can help reduce the spread of COVID-19. We're talking about air quality and the implications of that on COVID-19 and balancing energy efficiency and carbon with public health and safety of your employees. We've learned a lot. I especially have learned about humidity and learned that humidity is good. It slows transmission of virus and it's good for our health. So that was kind of surprising. And now I argue with my husband about the air conditioning in the house and tell him we don't need that. It's better if we don't use it so COVID doesn't spread. He's not on board with that. So that's been a great series. You can find those too. All of those are on our website, our COVID-19 page on our USGBC West Michigan website. There's lots of resources there, case studies, plans for return to work plans that you can download and help you get started on a return to work plan if you're looking to do one of those, links to the CDC, OSHA, all kinds of things. So you can view any of those webinars. Another thing that we're doing in Grand Rapids is we have something called the Energy Assistance Program. And this program provides energy audits to nonprofits, houses of worship, educational institutions, and small businesses. We prioritize businesses in communities where the need is the highest. And this has been a great program, and we've been able to help people to save money that would have went to our utility companies and invest it back into their mission. Again, on our website, lots of case studies, videos about some of the work that we've done and work that continues right now. So one of the things that we believe that we will get to through our Zero Cities work and through our Grand Rapids 2030 district is to institute a building transparency ordinance in the city. What we hope to learn from that is where we are at today. When I talked about those and showed you some of those slides of our baselines, those are theoretical baselines built on CBEX, as we were discussing earlier. So in other words, if all those buildings were operating at average, those are our baselines. But that doesn't mean that's where we are today. We could be better, we could be worse, we don't really know. We also know that efficiencies can be realized simply from the act of benchmarking, of understanding your building better can uncover actions that may be low or no cost. And so, I like to tell the story of, you want to go out, you want to buy a high efficient vehicle. If you didn't know that 10 miles per gallon is bad and 40 is good, how would you know? You wouldn't even know where to begin shopping because there's no baseline. So that's what Energy Star does for us. It's a free platform and it helps us to understand where our building is in relation to other buildings that are like us and that share our same climate zone. It's free and it's easy to use. This is a map of some local benchmarking policies that are in effect right now throughout the country. This is a little bit old, so there could be some newer ones, but you can see that a good portion of the country already has some sort of program or ordinance or, policy that they've instituted to help owners understand their buildings better via energy benchmarking. And you'll see that Michigan is listed there at the top with a state voluntary program and benchmarking policy. And that is our statewide energy reduction program, the Michigan Battle of the Buildings. So that's been going for about 6 years. We have nearly 250 million square feet across the state that are involved in this free program. And basically, they're just peer-to-peer sharing of stories of how and what is working and what is not working for us here locally when it comes to energy efficiency and water efficiency. Over the past 5 years, those competitors throughout Michigan have reduced over 135,000 metric tons of CO2e. And real importantly is that they've put $14.1 million back into the local economy. I'm sorry, Consumers Energy and DTE. So here's my contact information and my email address. If we don't answer your questions throughout this webinar, then happy to address questions from you individually. And I am going to move over now and start sharing Jan's presentation. We had a little bit of difficulty this morning in presentation sharing, and so I will be sharing for everyone. So I'll get her first slide up here and I will let you take it away, Jan. Oh, I just added a slide. Sorry about that. Let me do this right. There you are.
Thank you, Sherry. If you could go back one, just, it should be, yeah, great. Thank you very much. I'm Jan Culbertson and happy to be here and representing the Ann Arbor 2030 district. And the Ann Arbor 2030 district is relatively new. It launched in March of 2018. And since then, we've really started supporting architects, contractors, building owners, tenants, and managers in their efforts to create high-performing and net zero energy buildings. In Ann Arbor has, in that time, really started a history of climate action. Our membership right now includes 32 property owners, managers, 33 professional service stakeholders, and 9 community organizations, including the City of Ann Arbor. We have about 50 buildings, 2 million square feet, and we'll have about 40 of those buildings reporting their energy and water data in 2019. As Sherry mentioned, all 30 districts look at basically the 2030 challenge for planning, which as of 2020 is looking at a 20% reduction in energy, water, transportation, getting down to a 50% reduction in 2030. And what we've really discovered is that we need to pick up the pace. And so what we're doing in Ann Arbor is really, we created a whole carbon neutrality plan. So sort of the history of climate action in Ann Arbor is in 2012, the city kicked off a climate action plan that had some strategies, but had no staff, no funding. And in 2018, the Office of Sustainability and Innovation was created, and it was funded with a budget and with staff, which included Missy Stoltz and a crew of energy managers and policy folks. And in November of 2019, the City Council unanimously declared a climate emergency and tasked that Office of Sustainability and Innovation with creating a carbon neutrality plan that would achieve carbon neutrality community-wide in 2030. And this is sort of a snapshot of the emissions in Ann Arbor. And you can see that the University of Michigan is about a third of the community-wide emissions. And the University of Michigan has also created a President's Commission on climate neutrality, and they're due to report out in September. And just recently, it was actually June 1st, the City Council unanimously approved the adoption of that plan. And due to COVID, it wasn't funded at the level that we had hoped, but they did not cut any funding from the Office of Sustainability and Innovation at this point. So really, the A20 was created as a process and a vision for carbon neutrality in Ann Arbor. And it was really looking at unifying the community around a plan for carbon neutrality, and that it would really be a just transition. There are really 6 key strategies and some other strategies that didn't fit in some categories. And basically it comes down to powering our electric grid with 100% clean and renewable energy, switching our appliances and our systems and our vehicles from gasoline, diesel, propane, and natural gas to electric, significantly improving the energy efficiency in our homes, businesses, schools, places of worship, and recreational sites, basically all of the built environment, reduce the miles we travel in our vehicles by at least 50%, and significantly change the way we use, reuse, and dispose of materials, and enhance the resilience of our people in place. So the Ann Arbor 2030 district has a significant role in supporting the community-wide living carbon neutrality plan. And really our role comes down to supporting energy efficiency in the commercial building sector, which includes multifamily. It also, we are tasked with coming up with a way of implementing a benchmarking ordinance for commercial buildings, supporting vehicle and building electrification, reducing the vehicle miles traveled. And there's a pretty significant non-motorized plan in Ann Arbor that we also want to be part of implementing within the building sector, and developing a Green Business Award program with a group of community members. So achieving zero is sometimes looked at as a daunting task, and really what Architecture 2030 breaks it down in a couple of different ways. And one is to look at new construction and policies and design practices around that, looking at existing buildings and how do you promote reducing energy use and promoting the transition to clean fuel sources, and then also adding renewables. Then there's also the whole idea of embodied carbon, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. So let's look at some of these strategies, and you can go ahead and change it. So one of the things that Michigan will have coming up is we have not updated our energy code we've basically adopted the 2013 energy code. And coming up next year, the International Energy Code has adopted a renewable energy appendix. And Michigan statewide would have the option of including this appendix in our energy code. And basically what the appendix does is it gives local governments the ability to, one, use the appendix. And this would mean that, one, you have new buildings need to be designed to meet ASHRAE 2019. There's a component that if you can put renewable energy on your building, you need to do that. And then if you can't, you go ahead and procure offsite renewable energy. And this is sort of a way of efficiency, renewables, and offsets. And this is really how you achieve that carbon neutrality. So looking at an existing building, all right, typical office buildings might have an EUI of about 105 kBTUs per square foot per year. And what you try and do then is, through energy efficiency, reduce that amount of energy per square foot. And it looks like we lost the presentation. Can you bring that up?
Just
again?
a second. I am working on it. They asked me to hide a button that was showing, and when I did that, it stopped sharing your presentation.
Okay. So anyway, what you're trying to really do is reduce the amount of energy your building's using, add as much on-site renewable energy as you can, and then there's a whole procedure of qualifying offsets. And that's basically the strategy. So what is the Ann Arbor 2030 district doing, and what are our strategies around existing buildings? Well, one is benchmarking those buildings, providing an energy audit program. We're doing energy treasure hunts with houses of worship, getting the word out, creating power hours where we bring together building owners of different types and along with resources that they can use and implement. Create energy efficiency plans for buildings, energy transition plans, and also promoting Michigan Green Power Program, which is an E-certified offset. So our energy audit program, basically, we provide $2,000 toward a building energy audit, which covers about 14,000 square feet of a typical office or retail building. And the buildings have to be within the city limits. They need to have a membership in the 2030 district so we can continue to benchmark and monitor, and they are committing to reducing their energy, water, and transportation. And we also collect 13 months of data. We're scheduled to do about 40 audits this year with the program, and it's primarily funded through EGLE and DTE. Another two successful strategies, we talked a little bit about the commercial power hours, and they're not hunts. The hunts belong over on the How Treasure Hunt. And what we did with the commercial power hours is we broke it up into small commercial, large commercial, and restaurants and bars. And we were able to tailor the programs and bring the resources that would be most helpful for that type of building owner. For instance, a large commercial building owner typically has building automation systems and are interested in more smart controls. Small commercial buildings really are coming in at the ground level and very interested in energy audits and lighting programs. Restaurants and bars, right before COVID hit, we had a working group of restaurants and bars that were really tackling composting, recycle materials, and dealing with some of that alley congestion that we've got with all of the waste management downtown Ann Arbor. Treasure hunts, we kicked off one House of Worship treasure hunt, and the idea of a treasure hunt is really based on the EPA a treasure hunt process, where we have teams of people who have a range of knowledge about buildings, and we break them up into groups, and each group takes a section of the House of Worship, and we basically do an energy audit. So they're looking at lamps, they're looking at plug loads, they're looking at getting an overview of what their HVAC system is like. And the feedback that we got was really interesting. Two good things happened. One, they look at their building totally differently, and they started using some of these strategies and applying them also to their own residents. So what does the benchmarking look like? Well, basically we benchmark our buildings on an annual basis. And this is one of an historic building downtown Ann Arbor. And this building started with an energy audit. They were looking at replacing many of their HVAC units, and it was a really good intervention time. And as you can see, they're really on track to meet that 50% target reduction. So they replaced lighting, they replaced their HVAC. Now they're looking at updating some of their thermostats, and they're going to probably next year do another energy audit after they've gotten through their first energy efficiency plan. The other thing that we did this year was we took the Solar Faithful program, which was created through Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, and we applied it not only to churches within the district, but nonprofits. And so far this year, we have added 150 kilowatts of renewable power onto the grid in the district. Benchmarking our buildings, we have buildings that are extremely poor performers, and we have buildings that are stars. And this is one of our stars. Meadowlark basically relocated their offices into an old school building. It was like an 1890 building, and really did a good job in renovation, adding insulation, tightening it up, added a ground source heat pump system, and added PV along with EV charging. And they are very close to achieving net zero. And what's interesting is this building is actually just outside the boundary of Ann Arbor, and they have a well. And so not only are they doing EV charging and their well pump on their energy, and it is an all-electric building. This is another, it was a derelict building, actually, downtown Ann Arbor. There was a tree growing in the middle of it, and it was completely renovated, and they've renovated it so it's all cold climate heat pumps, so all electric, all LED lighting. And we came in this year and did an energy audit and found a couple of things that they could add. They did not have ERVs, and as a result of COVID, they were trying to also increase their ventilation rates in the building. So it's sort of a fun success story to have an all-electric building downtown Ann Arbor. Like Grand Rapids, we kind of backed up a little bit this year. Actually, it was at the end of last year, and wanted to look at, do a building stock analysis so we could set our water baseline. And it was a group of U of M students who went through and took tax assessor data, verified it, and created a whole list of buildings and analyze the building types that we had in Ann Arbor. And what we found out is Ann Arbor has a lot of smaller buildings. There are only about maybe 439, 450 buildings that are over 20,000 square feet. And similar to Grand Rapids, we also have a lot of single family housing, but the energy use is about split between small buildings and big buildings. And then the greenhouse gas emissions, again, the smaller buildings have a larger impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So we also went through and looked at our water baseline and found out that like energy and the square footage, multifamily buildings in Ann Arbor really was a large makeup. And that's not surprising. It's a college town. And we did not have any programs focused on multifamily. So we corrected that. And we started a multifamily pilot and engaged Oxford, which is probably the largest property manager in Ann Arbor, and they hadn't been involved in the 2030 district, but they kind of jumped at the chance to do this. So we have 2 of their multifamily buildings, and we also engaged one of the sororities on campus. And the pilot includes looking at tenant engagement, looking at doing an energy audit for Oxford as they're changing. They change over about 200 units a year. And so part of the energy audit was also a training of their maintenance technicians so that they can go in and do mini audits and do a blower door test for their units and tighten everything up as they're kind of changing out from tenant to tenant. it's also coupled with looking at green cleaning, increasing recycling and composting, and also energy and water benchmarking these buildings. What's interesting is we just got whole building data on the multifamily buildings from DTE. And that's a big deal when it comes to benchmarking, because it's really been a barrier to get the tenant energy data. The other thing that we're doing this year is we have a master's team that's working on setting our transportation baseline. And what one of the results of it is going to be a survey that each of our building owners can administer to their building occupants and get an idea of their transportation use and how to engage better at reducing those vehicle miles traveled. Okay, so going back to achieving zero, look, new construction and embodied carbon. Go ahead and switch slides, Sherry. Thanks. So embodied carbon is really looking at the investment and the total carbon that is used in building a building, from manufacturing the materials to transporting them to the site to putting them together in a building, and then the whole life cycle of what happens to that building at the end of its life cycle. How much of it can be recycled, how much of it can get reused, and how much of it really goes to the dump. So that's what we're looking at, embodied carbon. And when you look at embodied carbon, it's about 11% of the global CO2 emissions. And what happens is, as you really start designing and constructing more efficient buildings, embodied carbon becomes a larger and larger portion of those total carbon emissions. And that's why we really want to pay attention to it now. Okay, typical building, lots of operational energy. The embodied energy is relatively small. As you increase and build more high-performing buildings, you really got to pay attention to embodied carbon. So what happens really is embodied carbon and operational carbon are almost equal. And so if we're going to continue to reach that carbon neutrality, we've got to start addressing that embodied carbon. And where do you start? So 2030 created a challenge, of course, and they're looking at a 65% reduction in the typical embodied carbon by 2030 and designing buildings with zero embodied carbon emissions by 2040. And that's going to take a transformation of not only how we build buildings, but the materials and that we use in those buildings and how those materials are manufactured. I was talking to a glazing manufacturer, Guardian Glass, and their monthly natural gas bill in their Michigan plant is $1 million a month. And talking a little further with them is that they manufacture glazing a lot different here than they do in Europe, where it's much more efficient. And part of the issue is it's the way architects want different types of tints embedded in the glass. And that's not only wasteful when they change from one type of tint to another, but it becomes also a very wasteful and high energy type of glass. So there are a lot of things that we can take on. There are some embodied carbon resources that are well worth looking at. The Carbon Leadership Forum has a whole cadre of resources. The Embodied Carbon Network has a webinar series. The 2030 Architecture 2030 is establishing a carbon smart palette. They've also collaborated to do an EPD quick sheet, which is looking at the embodied carbon and energy impact of different materials. And recently there was a carbon issue of the Architect magazine that really went through a lot of case studies, and it is worth looking at. So what are we doing in Ann Arbor? We've established a committee to work on some embodied carbon strategies, and it's really the bulk of the embodied carbon is in the building shell. So we're tackling two materials first, concrete and steel. And what we're going to look at is tying in with some of the research that's been being done with different types of concrete at the U of M, and getting together a group that includes structural engineers, architects, the U of M researchers, concrete and steel suppliers. And we're going to work on some suggested alternatives within Ann Arbor. And part of that concrete also includes hempcrete. In talking with a couple of the marijuana facilities in Ann Arbor, there's a large waste of hemp because the recreational medicinal hemp has to meet a certain criteria, and if they don't, there isn't really a use for the crop. So working with some of the local distributors to reach out and connect the hemp industry with some of the research that's going on at U of M. So really, this was a big year, all right? 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And I think not only the Ann Arbor 2030 districts, but the other 2030 districts are really making a difference in forging a path toward carbon neutrality. So this is my contact information, and thank you for being a part of this program.
Hello, this is Connie Lily. I'm the Executive Director for Detroit 2030 District. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you, Sherry and Jan, for doing the brunt of the technical work about what 2030 districts are. I'm very excited to talk to you today about what's happening in Detroit. First of all, we launched 3 years ago this month, and so therefore we are celebrating our 3rd anniversary of this great program that we have built. It took us about 3.5 years or so of work of volunteers to bring it to the city of Detroit. And so we're very proud to announce that we now have 24 million square feet committed to reaching the goals of 2030 districts. And we have 32 professional stakeholders, which are businesses in the city and surrounding areas supporting our program. And we have 40 community stakeholders, some great nonprofits that we team up with to bring our programming and our support to our building members. So that's where we stand today. Sherry, if you can advance to the next slide. Who are our members? Well, if you're familiar with Detroit, you know we have a lot of very large buildings, and then we have a lot of very small. And like any city, there's all different types of buildings. So our members range from very large, like the TCF Center, the Little Caesars Arena, and the Renaissance Center, as well as some medium-sized buildings. We have the Guardian Building, Ford Piquet Plant. We have a great house of worship program where we have 18 houses of worship that belong to a special best practices group. We have small commercial buildings, restaurants, multifamily, So we take any building anywhere in the city of Detroit, although we are only measuring our reductions in mostly downtown and midtown. Any building anywhere in the city can join. So we leave no building behind. Any size building, any type building. This is the boundaries of where we are doing our benchmarking and our baseline. So if your building is in this area, we do ask our building members to share their data with us so that we can anonymously aggregate all that data and get our reductions. So we're just in the process of starting to measure that. We are finishing our baseline of about 1,400 buildings in those areas there. But like I said, any building in Detroit can join this program, this free program for building owners and managers. We felt it was important for the entire city to be able to participate in the free educational opportunities and assistance that we offer. So that is our boundaries. One of the ways that we are helping our individual building owners is with our ambassador program. So when a building owner signs up into our program, we assign them a trained ambassador that works with them for up to 12 months to help them with anything and everything that they might want to do to help create a high performance building, reduce operating costs. It could be anything from lighting to solar to wastewater reduction to a garden. It doesn't really matter. We plan and we try to meet our building owners where they're at in their process. So some are, have been doing it for years and others are still just beginning. So that's what our ambassador program is all about. That is also free for our building members. So how are we shifting to support our members in Detroit? As everyone knows, it's been an extremely difficult time right now. And as a building owner and manager, thinking about your reducing energy or water or whatnot, it's not always top of the list at this point. We hope to someday get back to that. However, right now in Detroit, we just really wanted to help our members manage their buildings in today's climate and help them finagle how to stay open and reopen. So one of our really popular groups is our Venue Museum Best Practices group. And we have about 7 or 8 major buildings in this group, and you can see some of them here, from Ford Field to Little Caesars Arena, TCF, Charles Wright, the Paquette Plant, and the Science Center. And this group comes together, facility managers and operators, and we discuss best practices. And right now we have shifted our focus onto reopening strategies. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of information out there for everybody on best practices for this. But what this group does is it's an open forum for our members to feel that they have somebody else to talk to that is in the same situation. And this is helping our group of venues and museums in Detroit really reopen kind of on the same theories or ideas on how to do it safely, and also how to work with the public. What do they expect? What do the building owners want them to do? How do you do it safely in all aspects of your building? So it's a great group, and we continue to work with them in that fashion by shifting our focus. As I mentioned, we have 18 houses of worship, and this program has been together about 3 years. So we meet about every other month at a different house of worship. This particular meeting was at Christ Church, and it's a great program. However, at this time where we can't meet in person, it does possess some challenges because being at these meetings is all about being in the house of worship along with people face to face. So we are starting back those meetings soon. We will do some virtually coming up. And we also have a small grant we are expecting to get where we're going to be able to offer solar assessments and water audits for our houses of worship. So stay tuned for that. We also have basic Energy Star Portfolio Manager workshops. We ran about 3 or 4 of them the last couple of years, and we had a webinar scheduled for Wednesday, the 27th of May. That has been rescheduled to next week, Tuesday, June 16th. We hold these trainings with EcoWorks. And the nice thing about this is that it's a small group. You do need to be a building owner or a property manager in Detroit. It's a free program. And we walk through the entire process of starting an account and how to look at the energy that you're using, and which then can obviously help you learn to reduce it. And we stay with you for the entire process. And we also do one-on-one training. So if you have any interest in that, let me know. Our building owner manager meetings have obviously been suspended at this time. We expect to have one virtually by the next couple months. They're always a great turnout. This is where our building members get to network with our board, our volunteers, our professional stakeholders and businesses. So if you're interested in joining this program at all as a building manager, you'll have access to these meetings for free most of the time when we can. This particular one was at the Ford Paquette plant. It was a great meeting. And obviously you can see what we talked about here, which was the greenhouse gas emissions. We had the city of Detroit involved, as well as Olympia Development. These are the types of meetings that are really useful for our building members, and we cover relevant topics to help you make changes in your building. And it's really important for building relationships and helping the people who have been doing things like this help the people who are kind of new. So if you're a part of this program, it's a good way for you to rub elbows with people who have been doing it for longer, or maybe have a different type of knowledge. And it really just helps you as a manager learn best practices so you spend less time trying to figure out what's best for your building. We also we team up with U.S. Green Building Council Detroit, and we hold the Sustainable Detroit Soiree. And this year, we're going to do it virtually. We're still going to have it and give out awards. This is a photo from 2018. The last 2 years, we've held it at the Guardian Building, which was very exciting. And we give awards out to the volunteers for both organizations. We in Detroit are a very volunteered organization and city, as many of you know. So we don't like to forget about the people who create these programs with us and help support them. So I'll look forward to seeing most of you at the end of this year for the virtual one. I never leave a presentation without thanking our volunteers for Detroit 2030 District, because we could not do it without them. So as you can see, we have a lot of ambassadors. We have co-chairs for the venue museum best practices group. We have an event team. We have communications, and then we have a data task force group. And as myself and another very small part-time staff member, we are very thankful for these volunteers. We also put out our progress report in July of 2019. This is just a snapshot of the cover. This is available online. We also have plenty printed if anybody should want one. And it came out very nice. We're expecting to do another one soon. But if you really want to know the nitty gritty of who our board of directors are and the different programs that we have going, and all of our professional stakeholder logos appear in this, feel free to go onto our website, and so you can kind of go through a digital copy of it. You can also follow our district on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And next slide. I do want to talk a little bit about professional stakeholder program. So Sherry touched on it a little bit, and in the city of Detroit, Detroit 2030 District, we have about 32 businesses that support our program, and we do charge, but they help bring the program to our members. We're super thankful for them. And we have been working, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, and Detroit. We share best practices between the three districts, and we're excited to announce last year that we now offer a professional stakeholder partnership with all 3 districts with a discount of 20%. And therefore, you don't have to think about which district you want to do. You can do all 3. And it works out good. Your logo and partnership goes with all 3 of our districts. So at the end of this, I do have another slide that Sherry's going to jump onto because I left it out. However, before we go, how can you participate? That's the real question of all of this, right? We're trying to figure out how you can get involved. So if you're a building owner or property manager, this is a free program for you. We're, as far as I know, in Detroit, we're keeping it free. I'm sure, I think Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids are along the same lines. So it's a free program. You have nothing to lose. If you need help, or if you are an expert at a high performance building, we need you to be a leader and be a part of our program. So we encourage you to enter your building into our program. You can become an event sponsor at any of our events. And that's our contact information that Sherry is going to the one slide that I left out that is very important. So if you were at our last meeting, February 27th at TCF Center, that beautiful building that is now hospital, we were lucky enough to get this meeting underway before COVID hit. And what Sherry's going to show you right now is the Detroit Energy Challenge website. So our district has been working with Office of Sustainability for quite a while to get this launched. We were lucky enough to get it launched at the end of February. However, you know, all of this other stuff got in the way, but we are here and we are still running and this is still going. So the nice thing about this program is that it just coincides with Michigan Battle of the Building. So if your building is already in Michigan Battle of the Building and it resides in Detroit, it's in our city, you automatically become a participant in the Detroit Energy Challenge. Our goal was to give awards out next year. It may get pushed a little bit depending on how everything goes with what's happening right now. However, I did want to introduce this to you, and you can just go to this website, or you can go to our website and it'll provide a link. So like I said, it's just a one-step thing. And if you want to do both, you can do both. But if you're in the city of Detroit, you can for sure just do the city of Detroit one. So thanks, Sherry.
Sure. All right.
That is it for Detroit.
All right. I'm just checking our chat box here to see. I couldn't look at comments. This has been a little bit of a challenge. So because I was running the PowerPoints behind, I couldn't look at the chat box while we were talking. So let's see what we got here. So I failed to copy the last speaker's contact info. I would be grateful if you would write her email here. So Connie, can you write in the chat box, or can only I write in the chat box?
Let me see if I can figure it out.
And it may be, okay, so she might have asked this prior to you, because I see that Andrea answered her with the Ann Arbor link. We've got a battle link put up there. Okay, so looks like
one thing we could mention, if people want information, that, you know, just going to 2030district.org leads you to all the districts,
all of our districts.
And then you can choose which district you want to go to from there, but it also gives you the option to look at other cities too.
Correct. Yes. So the 2030 will get to all of us, and then Michigan Battle of the Building or Detroit Energy Challenge will get you to both of those. And then I have the USGBC West Michigan website too, which is where a lot of our events are posted. So looks like we've got a question. Is cannabis and marijuana are being legalized regarding their good relationship with environment? Is cannabis and marijuana being legalized regarding their good relationship with environment? I'm not sure exactly what we're getting at there. So if the question is, the reason it's being legalized is because of their good relationship with the environment? I would say no. They're getting legalized, period. And it was happening. And actually, what happened in our city was the minute I heard that it had been legalized, I called the city and gave them some facts about the kind of energy use that was going to happen and some of the problems that were happening in other cities and states that had legalized but not thought about the energy use and the energy consumption of these facilities. And we saw Portland, Oregon have brownouts. And so when they heard that, they addressed it immediately, and we ended up getting it into our licensing, the requirements that needed to be met in order to meet our environmental goals. And they've been awesome about it, I will say that. And we're starting a cannabis roundtable next in 2 weeks, where we're going to start helping educate them on meeting their requirements. Let's see, we've got a question. The power hour treasure hunts. I didn't understand the concept very well. Which hour are we talking about? Power hour.
Sure.
All
Yeah.
hours.
All hours, right. So the concept of the power hour came from, initially, the city of Ann Arbor was doing an hour where they would give information to residents who were interested in renewable energy. And we took that concept and partnered with the city of Ann Arbor to create commercial building power hours that would, again, bring not only renewable information to building owners, but energy efficiency and financing resources and case studies. So it was a kind of a learning and a learning opportunity for a range of people. And we did that and we targeted specific small commercial, large commercial, and then the restaurants and bars. And then the treasure hunts, and the slide was confusing. So anyway, the treasure hunts are targeted to houses of worship, but they could also be applied to any building where you really wanted to engage the occupants of the building. And that's where you spend, it takes about a half a day to actually do the treasure hunt. So there's a commitment of time. So that's why it works so well for the houses of worship, because the congregation was very involved in that and learned a lot by doing their own energy audit.
So did you guys created your own energy hunt, but I know that Energy Star has energy treasure hunts. Is that where you got the idea, and did you model
Exactly.
after them, or did you just use their resources?
Yeah, we used some of their resources, but we developed our own, and actually we're going to compile that into a kit that will be available online for our houses of worship generally to be able to use. It does make sense to have leadership from engineers and architects and facilities managers, just so that there is some expertise sprinkled throughout the teams.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I also wanted to comment on the fact, and feel free to put questions in here. I think I've cleared out most of the questions already, so we might end early, but I've got a couple of thoughts, and one of them was the Embodied Carbon. I'm really excited to hear what's going on with Embodied Carbon in Ann Arbor, and I look forward to learning from you guys on that, because it is a complex subject, and we've tried to hold several events in Grand Rapids, pretty low attendance. I think people are really interested, but it seems really overwhelming. So what kind of resources do you think will come from this, Jan? Do you know?
Yeah, what the goal is, and it worked pretty well for Detroit too, because we have that same the supplier chain between Ann Arbor and Detroit is pretty similar, and it would be applicable to Ann Arbor. And you could probably reach out, to some of the architects and the structural engineers in Grand Rapids too. But yeah, just targeting concrete and steel. There are certain the U of M is doing some research on some different types of concrete and different additives. And really, because concrete is so, the mixes and so forth and what's available is pretty local. The idea is to come up with some actual specifications that architects and engineers can use that would reduce the embodied carbon in their concrete. And then with the steel is to really look at how is the steel being made, the recycled content, what is the highest recycled content and what type of furnaces, and how do you then again reduce that embodied carbon in the steel. The tails with the glass, I mean, that's going to have to be that is really going to have to be more of a national manufacturer and AIA kind of tackling, because that isn't quite as local. That's more of a national manufacturing issue.
Have you guys developed a resource guide yet on the current beta platforms that are becoming available that actually is showing the carbon intensity of individual types of concrete, individual, brands of insulation? I know that there's several large organizations, some of them, I believe Google is involved as well in one of them, building these platforms. So are you guys using those?
Yeah, we're going to start after we get the specifications going, we'll start doing some target continuing education on, okay, here's what's available locally, and then here are some of the things that you can do as far as, how to really do, there are online life cycle assessments that you can do to look at different systems and so forth. So it's definitely something that we need to pair with the U of M and with local architects and engineers with.
I can tell you at the Climate Leadership Conference in March in Detroit, they had a nice segment on this topic on embodied carbon and where they were moving forward and the changes that they were making on it. So that website might be a good place to look at. I'll see who was the speaker and
and I think that, Architecture 2030 is going to be doing a global teach-in that's going to focus a lot on embodied carbon in September, and the idea of three of us kind of doing some local follow-up on that, I think will be exciting too.
And they did,
and to mention that, maybe we could cover embodied carbon at the 2030 summit that was supposed to come this year to Detroit in October. That's where all the 2030 districts come together. That'll now be pushed to 2021. Hopefully we could get some conversation going on embodied carbon next fall.
Yeah, I think for now, I know it's a big investment of time to research every piece of the building and figure out who's got and some manufacturers might not even have the information available, what their embodied or what the carbon content is or embodied carbon of the production of that particular roofing material or what have you. But I think as an easy thing, like if it is something that you care about, yet it's a little hard to investigate every piece that goes into the building, what you can think about is sourcing locally, because just getting stuff to your site has a carbon factor to it in the transportation. So an easy way is maybe just buy local for now, and as these platforms become more readily available, hopefully we can just type in and make decisions with that and compare pricing. Got a question in here wanting to make sure that everyone knows which districts we are. So just to call that off, I'm Grand Rapids, Jan is Ann Arbor, Connie is Detroit. But if you're ever confused, getting hold of one of us will get you to the right person. The three of us work very closely together, talking several times a week about what's happening in Michigan, aligning programs and just, helping one another and helping us to help you. So I think that we've gotten through the questions and we're just 5 minutes, and I'm sorry, I've got a plane going over. I saw the sun come out when I was inside and I didn't want to miss my opportunity, but now that I'm out here, it's a little chilly. So when I hang up, I'm going to go back in.
Yeah, and just an advertisement on the 29th of July, I have a group of speakers that are going to do a deeper dive into not only embodied carbon, but the living building challenge from an individual building all the way up to looking at regional policies around that. So that's an advertisement for that event.
Well, if there's no more questions coming in, I want to thank Sherry and Jan and Connie for all of their work putting together these intense presentations with so much information. I'm sure that all of you were just taking notes feverishly. We gave you the information on how to contact them. So please scroll through the feed, at least the Facebook feed. But we will be, for everybody that RSVP'd through Eventbrite, I will be sending out a follow-up email that's going to have their contact information. I also want to share that AIA Michigan said that this presentation can be used for CES certification. The forms are on our website. I just put the link up in our Facebook feed, but it's detroit.design/Lester. Scroll down the page and find this particular event, and right below you're going to find two links. One form is for AIA member and one form is non-member. Go ahead and fill it in, put this information, and you will get CES certification. So we're very excited about that. Thank you very much again, everybody. And I'm really, really happy with the presentation and all of the questions and for having you here with us today. Again, my name is Andrea Bogart. I'm the manager of the Detroit Center for Design and Technology. This is what Lester said. Climate change exhibit and panel on sustainability and design. Thank you again and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.